Yes sir, it's that time of the year again where I dip my toes into some good old Superman glaze. The dedicated Bat glaze has been put on pause for a short period, but continuing to admire the GOAT through content will take effect in due time. You know, it'd be really nice to see a collective appreciation for Superman that isn't hindered by any bad faith assumptions or quote-unquote criticisms, if you can even call it that are manifested by people who don't know what they're talking about. Perhaps in an alternate timeline, Superman had consistent, well-made live-action movie adaptations that didn't leave the general audience questioning his appeal as a superhero. Sounds like an ideal world to live in. But unsurprisingly, there have been some downright atrocious takes that would leave any fan of the character dumbfounded by the sheer ignorance and stupidity behind them. Thankfully, these takes don't seem to be as prevalent as they were, say, 5 to 10 years ago, but some are still used by certain detractors who want to try and paint the Man of Steel in a negative light or push a certain agenda. This is basically a part 2 to a video I made a couple of years back going over some of the worst opinions on Superman. So if you're wondering why some popular misconceptions aren't mentioned here, there's a good chance they were mentioned in that video. One of the criticisms I've seen regarding Superman is some people questioning why he doesn't just solve every crime and problem imaginable. Being one of, if not the most powerful hero on the planet, he could just solve world hunger or prevent every atrocity from ever happening if he was a more competent crime fighter, right? Well,
not exactly.
This is similar to how people try to criticize Bruce Wayne for apparently not using his wealth to solve every global problem or end poverty. The problem with this line of thinking is that it's a very simplistic and naive way of understanding how the world works. There are a lot of complexities and powerful forces at play, whether it's businesses or governments that want certain areas or communities placed at a disadvantage for their own personal gain. A Superman story that perfectly encapsulates this is Superman Peace on Earth by Alex Ross and Paul Dini. In the beginning of the graphic novel, Superman thinks, why don't I just try to solve world hunger? Going out of his way to learn about its potential causes, effects, and possible solutions. So he tries to distribute food to as many hungry people around the world as possible, hoping to inspire others to form a more permanent solution. Some nations welcome his efforts with open arms, while other military despots try to deceive Superman in order to deliberately restrict their country's resources and keep its citizens poor, threatening to enact martial law or kill innocents if he tries to interfere. Other countries outright rejected Superman's efforts by labeling him as a political activist or a fraud. Some were fearful and didn't even bother to use the provided resources to their benefit. At one point, Superman gets blasted out of the sky while trying to deliver supplies to another war-torn third world country after that nation's government refused to let him land, determined to keep their people as dependent as possible. If not on a global scale, others might question why Superman doesn't just help solve all the crime in Gotham or something. There have been instances where Batman and Superman temporarily swap cities. A couple of things you'll learn in these scenarios is how it's more difficult for Superman to see through buildings in Gotham due to the vast amount of them that are lined with lead. With the amount of robberies and assaults that occur in Gotham every night, it'd be a near impossible task to stop every crime from happening in one night even with his super speed. When Batman obtained Superman's powers through a magic amulet, the immense power he got specifically because of the magic that affected him gradually drove him mad. It showed how his supposedly ideal method of fighting crime on a global scale led to an abuse of power, turning someone like Batman into a more fearful and authoritarian figure who imposes his will and presence in ways that started to become neither justified nor fair, threatening to harm even his loved ones or allies if they got in his way. Superman's actions are meant to serve as an inspiration for humanity's moral growth. His heroic efforts are about striking a balance between protecting people and becoming too great of a force in their lives. You could argue that Superman's continued presence in Gotham would eventually lead to an escalation in the tactics used by the criminals operating there, given the number of crime bosses and powerful individuals with vast resources. Criminal organizations could finance and distribute weaponry designed to combat Superman, kind of like how Intergang operates in Metropolis. Others would probably pursue business dealings with people like Lex Luthor to gain access to advanced technology. I mean, Metropolis became known for its Brainiac level threats, world conquerors, or giant sci-fi creatures rampaging through downtown.
What about escalation? We start carrying semi-automatics, they buy automatics. We start wearing Kevlar, they buy armor-piercing rounds.
Having to constantly monitor every single crime or wrongdoing on Earth that isn't world-ending could only be accomplished by Superman sacrificing his personal life as Clark Kent. It's important that he maintains his sense of humanity, which is part of the moral foundation that guides him. Having relationships with loved ones reminds him what ordinary people value, and why individual lives matter in the first place. If Superman abandoned those connections in order to serve as a 24/7 global surveillance and emergency response system, he would gradually become more detached from the people he is trying to protect, which is why I never really bought into the whole motto of Clark Kent being the mask while Superman is his true self.
Superman was born Superman. His alter ego is Clark Kent. The glasses, the business suit. That's the costume Superman wears. is. Clark Kent is how Superman views us. He's weak, he's unsure of himself, he's a coward. Clark Kent is Superman's critique on the whole human race.
That sentiment is obviously the mentality of the character in the movie rather than the writer having a misunderstanding of Superman, but there's some people out there who unironically believe that's how he's always been written definitively. Sure, there's a bit of an exaggerated persona when he's Clark Kent the reporter, but the idea that Superman views the human race through a negative lens is just ridiculous. Operating as Clark Kent isn't him mocking the human race, he's Clark Kent because he likes living a semblance of a normal life. This stems from having been raised like a human for a good chunk of his life. Yes, he's Kryptonian, but he wasn't quote-unquote born as Superman because he usually doesn't develop his powers until his preteen to teenage years. Clark is the person who was raised in Smallville by Jonathan and Martha Kent. He went to school surrounded by kids his age, made friends, and learned human values. Throughout the decades, there have been some depictions, like in the original Golden Age, where Clark Kent is meant to be nothing more than a facade. Iterations of post-crisis have the complete opposite sentiment, where Superman is the mask. But it's evolved into a more nuanced perspective, where understanding Superman as a character means getting to know both sides of him. Neither identity is necessarily more representative of his true self than the other.
It's often said Superman is the real character and Clark is the disguise. I do think in some ways Clark is Superman cosplaying as a regular human. I also think that Superman is a disguise. Him always putting that optimistic best foot forward, just not possible to always be in that place. That the only people who truly know Clark know both sides of him. That's Lois Lane. That's Mom, Pa Kent, and that's the Justice Gang. Anyone who doesn't know both sides of them doesn't really know Clark.
Another misconception that is often used by a certain group of people on the internet is the idea that Superman is completely devoted to the United States, a blind patriot whose actions are driven by the interests of the American government first and foremost. This is similar to the misconception formed by those same groups of people when talking about Captain America, where they think the background of Steve Rogers and the outlook of his persona as a hero means he'll blindly follow whatever the government tells him, which clearly isn't the case in the source material and the MCU, so it makes it even more baffling how some people come to these conclusions. It really is just the biggest self-report of not actually knowing anything about Superman and what he represents.
The only reason why Superman would be a hero as opposed to a villain is because he grew up in America, because he has the American way, right? He's emblematic of what America is, right? All the good American stuff. So this is why it's really important. It's not just truth, justice, and the human way, or truth, justice, and all that good stuff. There's a specific definition of Americanism that says that this is why America, for example, should be a world power, because America is better than other countries. And people who live in accordance with Americanism make the world better if they have more power. That's why America is good, because otherwise, Superman is bad.
Yeah, hi. We're here for, so much LARP. It's a crime.
It was really funny seeing people up in arms about DC changing the motto from truth, justice, and the American way to truth, justice, and a better tomorrow, suggesting that the former was this staple that's been around since Superman's creation, which really isn't the case. There have been countless iterations over the years, with truth, justice, and the American way first being introduced in the Adventures of Superman radio show. But guess what? After World War II, they changed it to just truth and justice. The 1948 Superman film serial had it changed again to truth, tolerance, and justice. The New Adventures of Superman 60s cartoon had it as truth, justice, and freedom. The American Way version didn't become the most popular or quote-unquote mainstream motto until the 1978 movie starring Christopher Reeve. Even then, it's not like every comic or adaptation since 1978 was fully committed to that motto. What's also important to note is how Superman being frustrated with government oversight or being seen as representing a nation just for saving people in a foreign conflict is not specific to one adaptation or James Gunn's Superman, for example, where morons or non-fans of the character express their grievances with this mere concept. Stories like Peace on Earth, as an example, already show Superman's desire to help people on a global scale, not just America. You've also got shows like Superman and Lois expressing that exact same sentiment.
I was just trying to save lives.
Sure. You rescued a North Korean submarine, a nuclear one. Couldn't you have just dropped it by American soil? But if I can't get your firm commitment that American interests come first,
I will continue to do everything I can to help the DoD.
that's not a commitment.
What you asked for was my allegiance to America.
America needs to come first.
Because I gave it to the world a long time ago. That crest you put on their suit, it's not yours to give.
That's the most recognizable symbol on the planet. I want everyone to know that we're the good guys. America can have more than one Superman.
Now, most people who are already pretty familiar with the DC Comics know this basic concept, which would also extend to those who might have only consumed a good amount of media surrounding DC characters and didn't necessarily take the time to read any comic runs. But I'm sure this misconception still exists in the minds of some casuals due to an aspect of DC lore that has technically never been done properly in a live-action adaptation. Batman and Superman are not rivals or frenemies, they are good friends. Sure, they've had some differences in the past, but any grievances between the two that reach the extremes seen in adaptations like Batman vs Superman or even Injustice are not at all the norm. Elseworlds stories or individual moments in main canon books where Batman and Superman face off due to mind control or some other means, brainwashing casuals into thinking that's the cooler and more interesting approach to their dynamic just screams, yeah, we got hype moments in Aura, but no good writing. There's been an ongoing mainline comic series centered on Batman and Superman together for every era of DC Comics since the Golden Age. From when Batman, Superman, and Robin were the central focus of different adventures in the 1940s, to the post-crisis Superman-Batman title, with its first two major story arcs adapted into the animated movies Superman, Batman, Public Enemies, and Apocalypse. There was a Batman-Superman ongoing title in the New 52 and Rebirth era, and there's a World's Finest title that's currently ongoing with over 50 issues published at the time of recording. Their friendship is predicated on having a grand mutual respect for one another. Comic pages like this that try to convey Superman's, I guess, disdain for Batman's motivations and how detached he is from humanity are complete cringe and present a fundamental misunderstanding of both characters. They both admire how the other's circumstances and upbringing could easily turn the average person toward tearing the world apart, but instead they channel their pain into something inspiring, whether through Superman's aspirational nature or Batman's relentless dedication. Both choose to turn a hardship into purpose. Superman has been good friends with Batman for so long that he can recognize his heartbeat almost as well as he can with Lois. It's always appreciated to see fans acknowledge and highlight their good dynamic to mitigate the perception of their friendship being surrounded with a lot of tension or hostility. Sometimes said appreciation can be taken a bit too far.
Whoa, hey.
But there has been a growing demand for a properly fleshed out Batman and Superman story in live action. The fact that the idea of Batman and Superman being frenemies has gained even some traction in the past decade is exactly why we need a World's Finest movie in the DCU, or at the very least a properly explored friendship between them on the big screen.
You're going to go ahead and meet with them, aren't you?
You know me too well.
Don't count on me to save you.
I won't. I know you pretty well too.
What took you?
I honestly don't think you'd understand.
Lois?
Mm-hmm.
You're right. Kryptonite's near your heart. I don't know if I'll be fast enough to get it before the wound closes.
Where's the Flash when you need him?
Do me a favor and lose the sense of humor.
Do us both a favor and buy one.
She died.
No. Why is it the good villains never die?
Clark, what the hell are good villains?
You didn't need to use the wire. I could have carried you.
Between you and me, I hate that.
That was my best friend. And you just killed him. We're surrounded. I can hear them coming.
I suppose it's useless to tell you to leave.
I wouldn't miss this for anything.
Your funeral.
Already had one.
Your cousin just torched $50,000 worth of custom hardware.
Send me the bill.
On a reporter's salary. Right.
When it comes to the physicality of Superman, he's well known to having a vast array of abilities, coupled with having insane levels of strength, durability, speed, you name it. But some people mistake this for Superman not really being a competent fighter, believing him to not be much of a scrapper if you take away his powers, or when placed against somebody who can match him in strength. This couldn't be further from the truth, because unlike Homelander, Superman can actually scrap. He's received occasional training from some of the best fighters in DC like Batman, who taught him how to learn an opponent's weaknesses, as well as general tricks and maneuvers to help Superman's efforts in fighting opponents who possess super strength on par with his. Learning some of the basics of combat training is an aspect of Batman and Superman's dynamic that is shown in the pre- and post-crisis eras of DC Comics, and you occasionally see Superman incorporate what he's learned into his repertoire when fighting powerful opponents. He's also received some training and has taken part in sparring matches with a Wonder Woman. Superman has shown time and time again, even when depowered, he can still run the ones better than the average man. While on the topic of his skill set, Superman also isn't a punch first, ask questions later type of character. Many people sleep on how his physiology can make him a pretty intelligent being. He's no dum-dum. At times, he's shown to be capable of processing vast amounts of information much greater than the average human, to a degree that can even match a supercomputer. Not only that, but being an investigative reporter has allowed him to develop a lot of sharp instincts and skills when it comes to following trails, spotting clues, and identifying people with possible ill intent. Well, that just about covers some of the more horrendous takes regarding Superman. I think as the years go by and Superman gets more exposure in theatrical movies, casual audiences will let go of a lot of the preconceived notions they had due to never having a strong attachment to the character, as most of them only consume stories surrounding superheroes through movies and TV shows. I'm sure there are some other takes that weren't mentioned here, but I think this video and the previous one cover the general gist of what bad Superman takes look like. You don't have to be an expert in order to refute these claims. I'm certainly no expert, nor do I have PhD level knowledge of Superman lore. You just gotta do the bare minimum of research, as it seems people are more interested in speaking with confidence than fact checking even the most basic information. But I guess that's just par for the course.